Cooperative Governance Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma has confirmed that 2 people have died in South Africa as a result of the tropical storm Eloise. A 5-year-old boy reportedly drowned while trying to cross a river in Mpumalanga, while in KwaZulu-Natal, a 14-year-old boy was swept away by water in that area. The heavy rains brought by the storm have also left hundreds of people displaced after their homes were wrecked by floods. Briefing the media on the country's disaster response to the storm, Dlamini-Zuma says the government is working with the affected districts.
The severe floods that we have had have disrupted some of the traffic because the trees have been falling on the roads, but fortunately the emergency services have been very responsive to make sure that they remove those trees. But some floods have cut out communities, and the local municipalities are dealing with that. And of course, some of the government buildings also have been affected by the storm, including also the bridges. Some of the bridges have been destroyed by the storms, meaning that our people are not in those areas, are not able to cross. And unfortunately, in Mpumalanga, we've had 1 fatality, and our condolences to the family. But our thanks go to the search and rescue teams that were able to recover the body of the deceased. So would like to really thank them for their prompt action.
All right, well, that particular briefing took place much earlier on in the day, and some of those numbers have been revised by the various provinces. We'll bring you the latest updates there. Let's continue here. Government has officially launched the Tourism Equity Fund to provide some form of relief to the country's tourism sector. The fund aims to raise investment and transformation in the industry, as tourism has been one of the hardest hit sectors by COVID-19 and the lockdown regulations. It's been identified as one of the key priority areas to revive the economy. To speak to us is the Parliament Portfolio Committee on Tourism Chairperson, Supra Mahumapelo. Mr. Mahumapelo, good evening, and thank you for your time tonight on News at Prime. Let's talk about this Tourism Equity Fund that has been announced by the President. How exactly will it work and what will it do?
Well, good evening, Kathy and the viewers of Newsroom Africa. Firstly, as the Portfolio Committee, we welcome the initiative as implemented today by the Tourism Department and the Small Business Department and addressed by the President of the Republic, Ntate Ramaphosa. The explanation we got today from the government is that the Equity Fund is going to be working for those who want to be in the tourism sector, who do not have the necessary funding, but we do also have the non-financial side where capacity building and funding markets for those who are in the tourism sector will be assisted. It's about 1.2 billion that has been set aside by the national government to make sure that the Equity Fund succeeds. Our responsibility as the Portfolio Committee will be to make sure that those who are targeted to be beneficiaries of the fund indeed benefit. As the President was explaining today, he was very clear that it's Blacks in general and Africans in particular who will be targeted, and the applications are starting as soon as tomorrow.
Are you not worried about, just some of the restrictions that have been set around this funding? Because it is being spoken of in the context of COVID-19. So is this funding for businesses that are reeling from the effects of COVID-19 and therefore will be able to tap into the funds that are being made available? Or is this for entrepreneurs who are new entering the space or perhaps already have establishments in the space that need more support? Who exactly is going to qualify?
Well, the criteria will be publicized by the department, but the indication was very clear today that this is in line with the pronouncement that was done by the president 2 years ago, that the Tourism Equity Fund will be established to help those who want to make it as entrepreneurs in the tourism sector. So it's not just about COVID and those who may have experienced a slump in their businesses as a result of COVID, but those that are affected by COVID obviously will also be covered. Because we are welcoming as a portfolio committee this initiative because unemployment in South Africa is rising at an alarming rate. The economy is almost stagnating, and inequality is also becoming bigger and bigger. Poverty in South Africa is ravaging. And as the portfolio committee, our position is very clear to the executive that we will want the focus of the equity fund and all other initiatives aimed at building entrepreneurship to focus on the villages, on the townships, the informal settlements, and the small towns, because that's where poverty, inequality, and unemployment are embedded.
Sure, and you know, that sounds like a great plan when one is looking at a short to medium term, trajectory. The reality is that right now we have the entire tourism industry in this country feeling the impact of having had to minimize its operations due to COVID-19 regulations. What is going to be done to assist all the companies in this country that operate in the tourism sector who are feeling the impact, and maybe some could well be facing closure as we speak?
Remember that there are other initiatives within government broadly which are aimed at helping businesses, particularly the SMMEs and those other businesses that are qualifying in terms of the criteria. I'll make an example. There was the Tourism Relief Fund, which was specifically targeting businesses as a consequence of COVID-19. But there is also TERSA, which is assisting. There is also the South African Tourism Board, which is helping everybody.
Mr. Mahumapelo, the fund that you're speaking about, as far as I can remember, it was to assist the tourism sector when we had the first round of lockdown restrictions and not necessarily applying under the second round of restrictions. When it comes to TERS, they seem to be...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
There's a deadlock at NEDLAC. There's a deadlock with negotiations. The UIF says that it probably doesn't have the money for TERS. So that's not money that's available to the tourism industry right now. So my question is,
yes,
what is available right now to help the sector?
Yes, I was saying that there are multiplicity of measures put in government, the executive side of government, to assist people who are in the tourism sector. Our responsibility on the oversight part of the state is to make sure that those promises that are made to entrepreneurs to make it in the tourism sector and broadly in business, indeed, the executive side of government must meet those requirements. Part of the announcement that was done today is the relationship that has now been practicalized between government through this equity fund and the private sector, which has made a substantive contribution to this particular fund. There are also opportunities that are there. If those who are watching the program, they can go into the website of the department, they will find there that there's funding in CIFA, there's funding in the DTI, there's funding in SA Tourism, There's funding also in the private sector.
Mr. Mahumapelo, the difficulty here is that with all of these different agencies and entities that you're listing, that you say have been available to provide people with support, the reality on the ground is that a lot of small to medium enterprises have not been able to access any kind of support from these entities. And in fact, they feel that the response that has been given by government to the impact of these regulations on the sector have been ignored to a large extent. Now, you've spoken about the oversight role that you're supposed to play as the portfolio committee. So to the extent that these are the concerns of the industry, how much of those are you registering and taking up with all of these different agencies that you've listed?
As the portfolio committee, we have had various and numerous engagements with both the executive side of the state, including the private sector. That is why I'm saying, Kathy, that we have raised the concern that bulk of the support on finances that are given to the tourism sector in this country, they go to the big cities. And we have indicated to the minister and the rest of the collective that we would want people who are based in the villages, in the townships, informal settlement and small towns to benefit more, because the reality is that the majority of people who are based in Pretoria, Johannesburg, Cape Town, Port Elizabeth and Durban, those are the people who gain access to a little bit of funding that is there. So we are on the same length with you, same wavelength with you to say, the shifting has to be done so that focus is done on most people who are in the periphery of these funding opportunities.
We're going to leave it there for tonight. That was Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Tourism Chairperson Supra Mahumapelo.